Viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is presented for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony from the trial of Sean Diddy Combs, as reported by Inner City Press. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence as the judge announced the next witness. All eyes shifted toward the back, then widened in disbelief. Stepping forward was a face everyone recognized, but no one expected: Usher Raymond. The Grammy-winning R&B icon wasn't there to sing, promote an album, or settle a label dispute. He was there to speak the truth about what really happened behind the locked doors of Diddy's empire. For years, Usher had remained silent. He smiled through interviews, sidestepped rumors, and played the game. But now, with Diddy facing federal charges including trafficking, coercion, and running a criminal enterprise built on abuse, Usher decided it was time to tell the truth. The truth, he says, has haunted him for decades. He began by recalling the day his mother told him he would be moving to New York to live with Diddy. He was just 14 years old, full of hope, freshly launched into the industry after his debut album. The arrangement was made by L.A. Reid, who believed that Diddy's mentorship would fast-track Usher's career. No one could have imagined the world young Usher was about to step into. "I thought I was going to learn how to be a star," Usher told the court, his voice firm yet laced with pain. "What I saw instead were things no teenager should ever be exposed to." What followed was a testimony that not only shocked the courtroom, but could shake the entire music industry to its core. From the moment Usher stepped into Diddy's Midtown Manhattan penthouse, it was clear this wasn't the mentorship he or his mother had imagined. The atmosphere was drenched in excess. Champagne served with breakfast, strangers passed out in rooms he didn't know existed, and familiar faces, people he recognized from TV and magazines, lounging half-dressed on designer furniture. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a set, a scene. "They called it the Flavor Camp," Usher testified. "I didn't know what that meant. I thought it was just branding." He paused. "Later, I realized it meant indulgence." The courtroom sat still, hanging onto every word as Usher painted a vivid picture of how mentorship quickly blurred into something darker. Diddy wasn't teaching him about music, vocals, or stagecraft. Instead, Usher claimed he was urged to embrace the lifestyle: celebrity parties, late nights, and, above all, silence. He told me, "This is how we do it. You don't ask, you just watch. Learn by watching. That's how grown men roll." One night, Usher said, he woke around 3 a.m. to unfamiliar sounds. Music played low in the background, and the hallways flickered with candlelight. People in masks entered the penthouse. Curious, he followed the sounds into the living room, and what he saw would never leave him. "It wasn't just sex," he said. "There was structure to it. It felt ritualistic. There were cameras, there were lists, and no one looked surprised. For a moment, he thought he had stumbled onto a movie set. I remember thinking, I shouldn't be seeing this." He was told to go back to bed, but he didn't sleep that night. That night, he said, forever changed the way he saw Diddy. The next portion of Usher's testimony focused on the silence, the warnings he never received. Not from his record label, not from his mother, not from the insiders who, he now realizes, all knew the truth about Diddy's world. And yet, no one said a word. "I used to think Diddy was just eccentric," Usher told the jury. "But we didn't realize back then. He had power over people, quiet power, absolute power." He explained that if Diddy didn't like you, your career would mysteriously stall. If he did like you, your silence became the price of admission. Usher testified that he wasn't the only one. There were others, young artists lured in with promises of fame, handed opportunities that felt like golden tickets, only to be pulled deeper into Diddy's orbit. At the time, they didn't understand what was happening. Now, Usher says they do. He didn't name names, at least not yet, but made it clear more people would come forward. "There were people all around us," he said. "Assistants, drivers, other musicians. Everyone acted like it was normal, but deep down, they knew. The adults failed us." One of the most unsettling moments in his testimony came when he described a private trip to the Caribbean that Diddy arranged when Usher was just 15. "It was supposed to be a retreat," he said quietly. "Just me, him, and a couple of others. No press, no cameras. The place was isolated." That's when the tone shifted. Usher paused, gathering himself. "That's when I realized I wasn't there to learn anything about music," he said. "I won't go into everything, but what I will say is this. I wasn't given a choice about the environment I was placed in, and it took me years to understand how deep the manipulation went." The courtroom was utterly still. Usher said that after that trip, everything changed. Diddy became more controlling. There were always new faces, endless parties, new rules. And every time Usher questioned anything, even gently, he was reminded who held the keys to his career. He told me, "You don't bite the hand that feeds you. Remember who gave you this life." Then, looking directly at Diddy from the witness stand, Usher said with finality, "You didn't give me this life. You gave me a prison. Nightmares." That's how Usher described the third part of his testimony, arguably the most shocking yet. At just 16 years old, he recalled, he was handed a contract, presented as a standard non-disclosure agreement meant to protect the internal affairs of Bad Boy Records, but buried in the fine print, Usher claimed, was language that went far beyond business. It wasn't just about protecting the label, he told the court. It included specific clauses about private events and discretion. At the time, I didn't even understand half the words in that contract. He said his mother had to co-sign it. The label's lawyers reassured them it was standard procedure, so he signed it because he trusted them. "That signature bought my silence for years," Usher said. "I wasn't allowed to talk about the parties, the guests, or the behavior I witnessed. They told me speaking out would ruin the brand, but no one ever asked what it was doing to me." He went on to describe how that very clause came back to haunt him years later. "In 2009, I was working on an interview with a major publication," he said. "The questions started getting personal. Before it even aired, I got a call from someone on Bad Boy's old legal team. They reminded me of my NDA, and then they said, 'We hope you're not trying to jeopardize your reputation.'" Usher said he canceled the interview, but it didn't stop there. It wasn't just legal threats. According to Usher, he began receiving subtle but chilling messages from people still tied to Diddy's inner circle, people he hadn't spoken to in years. "You think you've left that world," he said, "but it never leaves you. And if you step out of line, the consequences aren't just for your career, they're for your safety." The courtroom was frozen in silence as Usher reached into his folder and pulled out a copy of the NDA, the very contract that for years kept him from telling the truth. The judge leaned forward. The judge allowed the NDA into evidence. As it was read aloud, phrases like audiovisual documentation and unauthorized reproduction suddenly took on a darker, more disturbing meaning, especially in light of the allegations surrounding Diddy's so-called freak-off video library. Usher's voice cracked slightly as he continued. "That document made me feel like I was crazy for years," he said. "Like everything I saw, everything I felt, wasn't real, because I wasn't allowed to speak it out loud." Then, Usher shifted to a moment from 1996, one the public had never heard about. He was just 17 years old when Diddy invited him to an exclusive mansion party in Atlanta. It was a night that, in Usher's words, forever changed the way he saw the man he once considered a mentor. Diddy, he recalled, was in full host mode, commanding the room with charisma. Celebrities and models filled the sprawling estate, but there were others too, men who didn't seem to belong to the music industry. Quiet, watchful, out of place. The mansion was opulent, gleaming marble floors, security stationed at every entry point, a DJ spinning until sunrise. But the most striking feature wasn't the luxury. It was the locked door in the back. Usher testified that he saw Diddy whisper something to one of the guards. The man nodded and unlocked the door. "You're not ready for that yet," Diddy told him with a grin, but Usher peeked in anyway. "There were people in masks," he said, his voice low. "That's all I'll say. I didn't know what I was looking at, but I knew it wasn't right." The courtroom shifted uncomfortably. "I think that night changed me," Usher admitted. "I saw things I still can't explain. I don't know if it was legal, but I know it wasn't right." He then pulled out photocopied pages, worn, handwritten, and raw. Usher explained that he had started keeping a journal not long after that night. Usher began journaling in 1998, originally to jot down song lyrics and creative thoughts. But as time passed, those pages transformed into something far more personal, a vault of memories and observations from his years around Diddy. In one entry dated March 1999, he wrote, "Had dinner with Diddy and 3 execs I didn't know. They kept talking about loyalty, said, 'Loyalty keeps you on tour, honesty puts you back home.'" Diddy laughed. Another entry from October 2000 described a Thursday night party he was invited to, but chose not to attend. Too many secrets, too many masks. Diddy says it's just the culture. I don't agree. "Did you ever tell anyone about these entries?" the prosecutor asked. Usher shook his head. "I was afraid of losing everything," he said. "I didn't think anyone would believe me." When asked why he was sharing them now, Usher leaned into the microphone. "Because I've lived with it long enough," he said, "and it's time the truth comes out." Then, for the first time publicly, Usher recounted an encounter he said he hadn't even shared with his closest friends. In 1997, at just 18 years old, Usher said he was invited by Diddy to Miami to meet a powerful music investor, someone Diddy claimed could fund Usher's first world tour and help elevate his brand to a global level. "I thought it was about business," Usher said. "Diddy hyped it up like it was the biggest break of my life. He told me to dress up, look sharp, and be polite." When Usher arrived at the penthouse suite at the Setai Hotel, he said the atmosphere immediately felt off. 3 older men were lounging in robes, sipping high-end champagne. Several young women sat silently in the background. One of them, he said he was from overseas, looked at me and asked, "Do you want to be remembered forever?" Usher paused. He wasn't talking about music. He went on to say that Diddy left him alone in the suite with the men. "I felt trapped," Usher testified. "They didn't touch me, but the way they looked at me, the way they spoke, it was like a test. But one of them put his hand on my shoulder," Usher continued, his voice quiet, and said, "You can stay, or you can leave, but you'll never get another invitation like this again." Usher left, and that, he said, is when everything started to change. Shortly after, he was quietly removed from a major tour opportunity. A prominent producer, one who had shown strong interest in working with him, suddenly pulled out. No explanation, no warning. "No one ever said it was because I left that suite," Usher explained. "But after that night, doors that had always been open slammed shut." Then, weeks later, came a moment Usher said still haunts him. Diddy showed him a handheld video clip, grainy, intimate, and deeply disturbing. He laughed while playing it back. "It was another young artist," Usher testified. "He was doing something I know he never would have agreed to, unless someone made him." "Did Diddy threaten you?" the attorney asked. Usher paused, then answered, "He didn't have to. The people around him did. They didn't use words. They used silence and exile." That, Usher said, was the moment he truly understood. Fame, he said, was no longer about talent. It was about submission. That's how you stayed famous in Diddy's world. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly, and every camera trained on Usher's face as his tone shifted. "This is the hardest part," he said softly, "because now it's not about me anymore." He then spoke about the early rise of Justin Bieber, a young artist Usher had discovered and mentored from the start. "At first, it was all good," Usher recalled. "I wanted to be the big brother I never had. I wanted to protect him. But then, Diddy entered the picture." According to Usher, Diddy began showing interest in Bieber, inviting him to events and using a phrase that Usher had heard years before, "Flavor Camp." He was 15, Usher said, and they were just getting started. They were treating him like a grown man, Usher said, his voice heavy with regret. He was referring to Justin Bieber. One night in 2011, Usher got a call from Bieber. No words at first, just silence and breathing on the line. Then finally, a quiet voice, "I want to come home." Alarmed, Usher said his team tried to locate Bieber, but the teen star went completely silent for 2 days. When they finally reunited, Usher noticed something was off. "Justin wouldn't look me in the eye," he recalled. He just said, "It's fine, I'm good now." But Usher knew he wasn't. That's when he said he decided to confront Diddy, privately, directly. "What are you doing to these kids?" he asked. According to Usher, Diddy simply chuckled and replied, "Same thing they did to me. It's how the game works." Usher paused, the courtroom silent. "That was the last real conversation I ever had with him," he said. "After that, I stepped back. I didn't want my name tied to it. But watching what happened to Justin, I couldn't stay silent anymore. Then, Usher revealed something he'd never shared publicly, not even with close friends. In 2018, he received a call from an anonymous number. The voice on the other end was cold, distorted. "Tell him to keep his mouth shut, or we'll shut it for him." When the prosecutor asked who he thought was behind the threat, Usher didn't hesitate. He looked straight across the courtroom at the defense table. "I think you know." Usher then recounted the moment he says finally severed any remaining loyalty he had to Diddy, a night that, until now, had never been publicly discussed. It happened in 2002 at what appeared to be a private party in a secluded estate in the Hollywood Hills. But according to Usher, it wasn't just a party. It felt more like an initiation, he testified, like a rite of passage. He described a luxurious setting, but with an underlying tension. Several young artists and models were in attendance, many under the impression they were being groomed for major career opportunities. What Usher said he witnessed next was something that would haunt him for years. Usher testified that he had been invited to what was described as a casual introduction to a European producer. But when he arrived, it was clear something was off. There were no executives, no producers, just dim lighting, security stationed at every corner, and an unsettling air of secrecy. According to Usher, phones were confiscated at the entrance, and guests were handed a series of documents labeled as NDAs. But these weren't standard non-disclosure agreements. They were filled with unusually aggressive language. "The vibe was wrong," Usher said in court, his voice reportedly cracking for the first time during his testimony. He went on to describe an atmosphere filled not just with artists or music executives, but with people who seemed to be there purely as observers. Some were familiar, even famous faces, individuals never publicly linked to Diddy. While Usher declined to name them on the record, he hinted that if the trial continues, others may be compelled to step forward. The most chilling moment in Usher's account came when he described attempting to leave the party early, only to be stopped by an unfamiliar man and led to a side room. Inside, he found Diddy waiting. "You're not ready yet," Diddy allegedly told him. "You still think this is about music. This is bigger than that." Usher said he left that night and never attended another party hosted by Diddy again. His testimony then shifted to Diddy's business dealings, especially his treatment of bad boy artists. For the first time, Usher submitted internal emails and draft contracts showing that as a teenager, he had signed a development deal that bound him to 5 albums and relinquished control of his masters until he turned 35. "I didn't know what I was signing," Usher admitted. "I just wanted to sing," Usher said quietly, before revealing that he wasn't the only artist bound by predatory contracts. He named others, Carl Thomas, Total, Black Rob, and the late Craig Mack, describing a pattern where Diddy would pull artists in with promises of mentorship and fame, only to discard them once they were no longer useful or obedient. Usher shared that, years later, a private accountant sent him a spreadsheet detailing royalties he had never received, totaling more than $4.3 million. When he confronted Diddy about it, he claims Diddy laughed and said, "If you knew what was really owed to you, you wouldn't sleep at night." According to court documents, several artists had quietly accepted settlements, some as small as a few $1,000s, just to regain the right to use their names or perform their own music again. One of the most startling revelations came when Usher disclosed that in 2011, he had attempted to organize a secret meeting with other artists to confront their shared grievances. But the meeting never happened. Someone, he said, tipped Diddy off. Even more disturbing was his account of witnessing Diddy order the destruction of demo tapes and video footage belonging to an artist who had threatened to go public. That artist, Usher said, has since vanished from the spotlight. "I don't know where he is, nobody does. But I remember his voice. And I remember that he was scared," Usher stated, his words leaving the courtroom in stunned silence. In the final moments of his testimony, Usher was asked why he had stayed silent for so long. His response was haunting. "It was heartbreaking," Usher admitted, because he believed he owed Diddy. "I thought if I stayed silent, I could move on and still be grateful. But you can't be grateful for a lie." The guilt had gnawed at him for years. He spoke candidly about watching other young artists fall into the same traps he once did. For a long time, he didn't know how to help them without risking his own career. "It was always about leverage," he said, And Diddy had all of it. Usher revealed that in 2016, around the time the infamous Drink Champs clip resurfaced online, he tried to confront Diddy privately, but he was blocked by Diddy's legal team. What struck the courtroom most deeply was when Usher read from an unpublished journal entry he had written the night he finally left Diddy's mentorship for good. "I survived Puffy, but did the kid in me survive? I still don't know." He concluded his testimony by addressing the court, the victims watching online, and the younger generation of artists who idolize those on trial. "This isn't just about one man," he said. "It's about an entire system that told kids like me to be silent, to stay in line, and never question the hands that fed us. But I'm here now, and I'm not afraid anymore. Not for me, because I've already lived through it. I'm doing this for the ones who didn't." In that moment, the courtroom fell completely silent. What had started as a federal case centered on racketeering and trafficking had evolved into something far bigger, a reckoning for decades of silence in the music industry. What the public never knew until now was that, at the height of his early fame, just after releasing 8701 in 2001, Usher quietly disappeared from the spotlight. For an entire week, Usher disappeared from the public eye. Industry insiders assumed he was simply taking a break from the grueling tour schedule. But in court, Usher revealed a far more painful truth. He had checked himself into a private mental health facility in Northern California under a false name. According to his testimony, the breakdown was the result of unresolved trauma dating back to his time living with Diddy as a teenager. Usher admitted that shortly after turning 20, he began experiencing panic attacks, often triggered by seemingly ordinary things: flashing lights, crowded spaces, certain types of music. At first, he didn't understand why. But then, one night in New York, while staying in a hotel that coincidentally stood on the site of one of Diddy's infamous parties, everything came flooding back. "I walked into the hallway and smelled the same brand of candles he used to burn," Usher told the court. "My whole body froze. I started shaking. I couldn't breathe." That night, his team rushed him to the clinic, where he remained under observation for 5 days. What he shared with the in-house psychiatrist was something he had never spoken about publicly before. "I told him I saw things no kid should ever see. I lived in a world where power meant silence, and survival meant smiling through the pain. That house, it wasn't just a crash pad. It was a place where dreams were sold, but your soul was the price." Usher testified that the psychiatrist diagnosed him with PTSD, a revelation that stunned both the courtroom and fans watching around the world. He said it took nearly 2 years of therapy before he could finally sleep through the night without being haunted by recurring nightmares.